Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to gather this daily conversation with people around the world. We, on this show, cover three crises: health, economy, and race relations. We're always looking for guests and theme ideas. Please email me, sree@sree.net, sree@sree.net. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear your ideas. Today, we have a very special show, episode number 131. That's right, we've been live for 131 days, no vacation, no weekends, because the crisis continues. And we are talking about Portland in crisis. Portland, Oregon is in the midst of an unprecedented set of turmoil as the federal government goes after peaceful protesters. We speak to folks there in the know. We're joined today by three special guests: Barbara Bernstein, host of Locus Pocus, a weekly environmental show on KBOO. Lauren Goche is founder of a progressive Realtors PAC and a realtor in Portland. And we're also joined by Eder Campuzano, a reporter at the Oregonian, and he will be sharing what he saw on the front lines, as will Lauren, and we'll be hearing a lot about what makes Portland special and an unusual place. Please share this right now with your friends and family. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I'm asking our guests also time. I'm giving them time so that they can share this and these links as well, and we can get their friends and family to watch tonight as well. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree Sreenivasan. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and the founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting business. It is my honor to gather all of you here, and I'm so grateful to the folks who make this possible, our producers especially, Vandana Menon and Rose Horowitz. Rose Horowitz 31 on Twitter and Vandana_Menon on Twitter. Please follow them. They'll be tweeting, sharing, and connecting. We want to tell you, if you've never seen the show before, it is brought to you in partnership with Scroll.in, one of India's biggest and most important news, culture, and analysis websites. Please check out Scroll.in. We are also brought to you by other sponsors that we'll tell you about. But we've had more than 1 million views of our 101st 25 episodes. We've had 234 guests from 48 cities and 13 countries. We've had doctors, nurses, authors, journalists, CEOs, founders, teachers, professors. We've tried to get as wide a variety of people to help us understand this devastating crisis. Tell us where you're watching from, please. We'll do a global tour in a few minutes. Tell us about your favorite memories of Portland, Oregon, if you've had a chance to go. I have, and I loved my time in Portland, and it's such a special, unusual place. So before we bring in our guests, we want to thank our sponsor, especially Muckrack Academy, that makes it possible for me to put together with my dear friend Linda Bernstein the Fundamentals of Social Media free certification course available to journalists, PR professionals, and everyone. No matter your age, no matter your background, wherever you are in the world, get a free certificate and learn Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. More than 4,000 people have taken this class. You will want to take it too. Linda and I learned a lot putting this together with our friends Shristi Heber, as well as Stefan Kaplan and Mike Schneider on the Muckrack Academy team. So please check this out right now, mrac.co/social. We are live right now, folks, on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Please hit share. And we want to tell you about one more show, and then we'll get started. We want to tell you about She's on Call, which runs on Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's a show starring two of my surgeon friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in New York City and New Jersey.
And I'm Dr. Marina Kurian. I'm a general surgeon in New York City area.
We'd like to introduce you to our new show, She's on Call. We air live on social media platforms from 11 a.m. to noon every Sunday Eastern Time. We discuss the medical topics of the week.
We have two great guests, experts in their field, that help us analyze and look at some of the topical issues of healthcare. And we are on 11 to 12, so please join us.
We'd love to answer your questions, so please share and watch and send us your questions and comments.
See you Sundays at 11.
Folks, you don't want to miss that show. Please join them. This was last week's guest, yesterday's guest, Dr. Wendy Cinta and Tamara Fountain. You want to check out that show. All right, are you ready to go to Portland with me? I know you are. Please tag your friends. Please tell them to tune in right now. There is a national, international crisis going on in parts of Portland, and there is so much that we can learn from what's happening there. So let's go right now to Portland, and let me bring on our guests. Please say hello to our friends who are with us here tonight. They are joining us, Barbara Bernstein, Lauren Goche, and Eder Campuzano. So let's say hello to all of them as we bring them on. Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
And there's Lauren, and there's Eder.
Howdy.
Hi. Thank you all for being here at such short notice to talk about Portland and what's happening there. We've been doing cities under crisis, but this is the first time we're focusing on one that is where we should also be talking about what's happening there with COVID, but we're really focused there on what's happening with the courthouse and other things. So let's first ask each of you, as I always do on this show, how you're doing, how's your family, and we'll start with that. Barbara, over to you.
Well, I'm doing pretty well. I mean, I generally have been working at home for many, many years, so staying at home has not been a big change for me. This is my studio where I do my work. I do miss going to the station because I do a show on KBOO, the community radio station in Portland, every week, and we haven't been in the station since March 13th. So it's strange to be doing everything remotely and sending it via the internet and listening to it 4 days after I record it. But Portland, I think, is one of the better places, or at least until this week, was one of the better places to be stuck at home because we've got great parks. I've been going hiking on Mount Hood and Mount St. Helens and been able to get out into the world as long as I maintain social distance. And there's also a really great community here. So except for the fact that we are watching the demise of the U.S. Constitution happening in Portland right now, up until this point, it's actually been a pretty easy place to be enduring COVID-19.
Yes, apart from that small problem, we're doing okay. That's right. We have to laugh because otherwise we'll be crying all day because there's so much terrible news, especially with relation to this pandemic. Let's go to Lauren. Same question. How are you doing and how's your family? Oh, sorry. 1 second. You're muted. Can you just unmute?
Do that. I am doing well. Real estate in Portland and from what I can tell around the country is on fire. So I'm very busy, which is a weird thing to be right now. And I miss my family. I live alone. But everybody's well. Thank you.
And you said that you'd been working so hard that this was like one of your first days that you'd gotten a little break, right?
Yeah. I escaped to go a very Oregon thing. I went to the river. It's like 95 here today. So I escaped my phone. I haven't had a day off in a couple months. So I took 5 hours back and rushed home and took a shower so I didn't look like a river rat.
Well, thank you for being here. Let's go to Eder. Hi, Eder.
Hi. So earlier today, I actually had kind of a nature is healing moment. I live in a kind of trendy part of Southeast Portland where you'd see e-scooters on practically every corner. And today, for the first time since the pandemic started, a couple of fully charged scooters are just like sitting right outside my window. So that was a nice little like throwback to the way things used to be. But other than that, just like our other two guests are saying, I miss my family. I grew up an hour away from here. Multnomah County has been under more strict lockdown orders than other counties surrounding it and other parts of the state. So I haven't seen my family in person since everything started. So that's probably been the toughest thing. And so has honestly reporting. You know, I'm the education reporter for the Oregonian, so keeping up with everything that's happening in schools has just taken up a lot of my time lately.
So let's start by just asking about that particular question about schools. What is happening with the debate around schools? Are you going to be opening? When does a school year typically start, and what is the plan?
Right. So the first full week in September is when schools usually start across the state. I cover the largest district in the state, Portland Public Schools here in the city, and they usually start the week before Labor Day. And right now, the tentative plan, and you know, if I could, I would underline and bold tentative, is to have students return in person at least 2 days per week, or not at least, like 2 days per week, starting the 14th, if public health officials give the district the go ahead and say, yes, we believe that you'll be perfectly fine if you allow children to return to the classroom for this long. And every district across the state has different plans that they're submitting to the Department of Education. By August 15th, I believe, is when they're supposed to submit their final blueprints for opening, whether that's going to be fully digital, in person 100% of the time, or a combination of the two. That's what every district in the state has to submit, or district has to submit to the state before they start their proper school year.
And so you're still waiting on that. So, yeah, so that's still going on. Let's look at the front page of the Oregonian, folks. You're looking at it here right now. Tell us what we're seeing here. Feds conduct surveillance from courthouse, analyze social media videos, post undercover agents, and crowds record show. So this is for people in the know. They understand this is like a update of other stories. But I'm looking from here, it looks like the entire city's on fire, but it isn't, as you explained in a story you did recently. So why don't you start by explaining the story first, if you wouldn't mind, Eder, and then we'll go into where this is exactly and get everyone involved as well. In the meantime, everyone who's watching, tell us where you're watching from and tell us your comments and what you've heard and any questions for our Portlandians. What is the right word, by the way?
Portlander.
Portlander. Okay. All right. Eder, go ahead.
For sure. So, as I'm sure you've seen, a lot of national media, particularly right-wing media, and the federal government have kind of painted Portland as this city under siege, when really the sort of places where you see a lot of those scenes of, a dumpster burning or police cracking down on demonstrations are limited to a few very small sort of portions of the city, about a 12-block segment of downtown Portland, where law enforcement buildings are, primarily right now, the federal courthouse where the federal police are stationed, where demonstrators are turning out to, again, advocate against systemic racism and police brutality, and right now specifically against, this perceived occupation by federal officers of the city of Portland on the president's orders. So up until the July 4th weekend, things had started to kind of die down a little bit because protesters had been, for the most part, seeing progress, right? The city of Portland agreed to cut about $20 million out of the police bureau's budget. So that was sort of a win for the demonstrators and for folks who were rallying for the cause out here. A series of police accountability bills had made their way to the legislature. And so demonstrators were seeing progress. And it wasn't until the president basically signed his order to protect federal property and monuments and had federal police start showing up that things got heated again, when demonstrators saw that, it was kind of an overreach or, kind of an overreaction to a lot of the stuff that people were seeing. So it really is just those 12 blocks surrounding the federal courthouse in downtown Portland. As you can see, the Portland Police Association also had a fire lit inside of its headquarters. That's the union for the rank and file police officers. And so that we made a map basically to show, relative to the 145 square miles that this city covers, where you're seeing all of these images of, the tear gas and all of the riled up action happening. It's a very small portion of the city, and it is an important thing that's happening. But, our main goal with the story that I published on Saturday morning was to say, yes, all of these things are happening, but they're confined to a very small portion of the city, mostly, not mostly, completely in response to authority and law enforcement.
Thank you. Let's go to Barbara to talk a little bit about some context for all of this. And Portland has a history of folks who fight for the right thing and are very known as a progressive place.
Actually, I wanted to sort of follow up on what Eder just said, that
Please.
As far as the coverage goes, it's been rather interesting to watch the national coverage of this. And some of the, I think the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian in particular, have done really accurate coverage. But I was reading an article in the LA Times today, and I felt like they got it all wrong. And they started quoting all these people, like two people from suburban Portland who think it's really great that the feds are there because there's all this damage going on, all this disaster and turmoil in downtown Portland. So I feel like it's important. I think I would recommend that people really read the Oregonian. And I've not always been a big fan of the Oregonian, but I just subscribed today again because I'm so pleased with the way that they're covering this. And really, I think understanding what the issues are, and I really understood the whole issue around systemic racism, and they're doing their part to address it. Portland actually has a long history of racism. Oregon was admitted to the United States back in, I think, 1859 as an all-white state. And we've been fighting that legacy ever since. The Ku Klux Klan was very active here right after World War I. In fact, right after the last big pandemic, the Spanish flu, misnamed Spanish flu, but the 1918-1919 flu pandemic. And there were marches in Portland and Salem and smaller cities around the state with the Ku Klux Klan mainly attacking Catholics at that time. When I came to Portland in 1971, there was a medium-sized anti-war movement and a small communist party, and there had been some action, but things really changed, I think, here in Oregon in the late 70s and early 80s with the environmental movement, and it was really a center for a lot of environmental issues, particularly logging and clear cutting. In the late 80s, we actually were named Little Beirut by George W.H. Bush because every time he came to Portland, or every time Dan Quayle came to Portland, there'd be these massive demonstrations. And we sort of wore that badge proudly, that we were Little Beirut. But ever since then, there's been growing numbers. And during the lead up to the Persian Gulf War in 1990, 1991, there were massive protests and much, much bigger protests before the Iraq War started in 2003. It's becoming normal now to have protests where 20,000 people show up, where when I came to Portland in 71, like 500 people would be a lot. And I think that we have a reputation for being a very liberal city, which is, in my history, kind of a relatively recent thing. And some of the protesters, I think, might debate just how liberal Portland is, because it's a very white city and it still has a lot to do to come to terms with all of its innate racism and the invisibility that much of the Black community and other people of color have felt in Portland. But I'm very heartened by the protests that have started since George Floyd was murdered, and to see people out in the streets night after night after night and marching 10, 15 miles a night and going all over the city and doing things that we had talked about, because I'm very involved in the environmental movement and in fighting fossil fuel projects here in the Northwest. And we've been talking about how to reach other communities besides always having our marches downtown. And it was interesting to see these young people, mostly of color, just figuring out that you go to a different part of town every night. And they started at a place that used to be a high school in Southeast Portland, probably not that far from where Eder lives. And it used to be Washington High, and it's now called Revolution Hall, of all things. And it's a city-owned place, and the city basically let the protesters start there, and they'd have speeches, and then they'd march somewhere else. And it grew and it grew, and I think it's one of the forces that's really changing the city right now.
I want to tell you, I was listening to one of your episodes about what's happening with the environmental movement, and the ranking of where Portland would be in my mind of pro-environment versus having trouble. It went from a place where energy industry wasn't a big focus to it became one of the most precious or most valuable loads were found, right? Like the mother lode, if you will, of certain kind of gas, right? Like, isn't that what?
No, actually, what we are is we're the choke point for the fossil fuel industry, because all the mother lode is in the Rocky Mountains. It's in British Columbia, Alberta, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, but they have no way to get it to their markets, which is Asia. They have to come through Portland, and and also through Vancouver and through Seattle. And we've been doing a very good job of stopping them for the last 15 years, but it's still an ongoing fight that has a long ways to go.
All right. So everyone, please check out, tell us the name. I love the name of the show.
It's called Locus Pocus. And I do say it's a weekly conversation about our place on the planet, though I've been criticized for that because it's maybe not really what the show's about. But anyway, we are sort of struggling with, finding out what our place on the planet is. And right now, I think it's really critical in the face of a pandemic that we really understand how we relate to this planet and how we stop abusing it.
Thank you. And KBOO is the progressive station, community radio station there. So.
Right. Yeah, we're the oldest community radio station in the country that's not part of the Pacifica network. So we've been around since 1968.
Very, very cool. All right, let's go to Lauren. Lauren, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they've articulated much better than I ever could. It's funny, the police association building that Eder talked about is actually like 4 blocks from my house, 4, maybe 5. And, I think it's, once again, it was literally just that building. And it is so close to all of us, like nothing else was damaged. That's not the point. It's not the point to just damage property. It is very, very focused on police brutality. And I think, I'm sure you guys can jump in and get the statistics better. But since George Floyd's murder, Portland has evidently had the most incidents of police brutality with the protesters. Correct me again if I'm wrong, in the country. So we're a hot spot for that. And I have not seen it myself. I've been lucky, but I have many friends who have been peacefully protesting, not inciting anything. And it is in fact the police that have been inciting. And this is a whole different level now that the feds are here. And evidently our border control, non-trained border control, I guess we just found out. So that's interesting.
Yeah,
right.
Border Patrol is here. And there was an internal memo. Yeah, basically saying that, these, just so you all know, the agents that you're dispatching out there are not trained in riot control. And that's, dispersing big crowds when they get rowdy.
Guys, remember, we're 300 miles from the border, so I think we really need to have border patrol, helping us out here.
Yeah.
So are they bringing people from the Canadian border, or are they bringing, where are these people coming from?
I think they're coming from the south. I think it seems like it's all kind of tied in with the kind of police brutality or the whatever patrol brutality that we've been seeing at the border since Trump became president.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's have Lauren tell us about this website.
So Taking Ownership PDX is founded by a friend of mine, Randall Wyatt. He is a local activist, a local rapper, a local Black Portlander. And we are just now we're getting our own nonprofit started, but we have a fiscal sponsor right now, so if anybody wants to donate. So our goal is to keep Black Portlanders in their houses instead of being continually pushed out, gentrified, and repair houses, basically make sure that they stay in their houses can continue to gain equity and build generational wealth. It's gathering speed. We already have helped one house. We're on to 3 right now. We are just kind of getting, everything happened very fast. And so we're just getting our ducks in a line right now and finishing up our nonprofit, and getting, volunteer waivers done. And, we have houses lined up to, we have one that we're rebuilding a front porch and replacing gutters and, just making sure that these Black Portlanders aren't, they're in safe houses and their houses are being taken care of so they don't lose equity for when they eventually want to sell it down the line. They're not pushed to sell it. It's something I'm really excited in, considering real estate has a pretty horrible history of redlining and racism in general. So that's one of the things that I've been involved in and very proud to hopefully help support.
Terrific. It's called Taking Ownership PDX.
Yep, we have an Instagram page and a Facebook page. This is our website. There's information on how to donate and a volunteer form if you would like to volunteer. Everything from, if you want to bring lunch to some volunteers, or you're a contractor or a painter, or you want to donate money, we're about ready to do a pretty big push to raise some good funds. So I'm excited.
Thank you, and please keep us posted. One of the things that we have noticed is that the issue, as you said, that Portland is a predominantly white city, and a lot of the protesters, if you look at the protests, a lot of white folks who are being attacked by white police officers. And we did reach out to the Scanner, which is the local African American newspaper, and asked them to join us. They were not able to. They've promised to come on a future show. So if people are interested in the kind of black view of Portland, thescanner.com with the SKANNER is something they can check out. And they're discussing, of course, among other things, big story there was the passing of John Lewis, who we're still mourning. Yesterday, we did a show where we talked about John Lewis. And on Saturday, on my radio show, on WBAI Progressive Radio here in New York, we had a 2-hour call-in show about John Lewis, and we encourage you to check that out. It's pinned to the top of my Twitter feed, and my newsletter was also about John Lewis and his legacy. So let's go to Eder to talk to us a little bit about what it's like, what we've been seeing. And before we do that, I want to do what we call our global tour of having people say hello from around the world. So as I mentioned these places, if any of you have been there or have a memory of the place, we'd love to hear it because we want to show everybody how we're all connected. We're going to start with our first guest. He's always watching. He's watched 131 straight days, and that's Jonathan Bernstein from Union Square. So your favorite New York City memory, if you've been, we'll start with you, Eder, Lauren, and then Barbara.
See, I haven't been, and my girlfriend and I were actually supposed to go to Brooklyn in April to see Elton John, which obviously didn't get to happen. So still waiting on that. Okay. Still hoping we get to see Elton.
All right. Well, you'll come out here and we'll have a drink together. All right.
We'll do it.
All right, Lauren, over to you.
I've only been in New York City twice. Once I had never been anywhere, and I was like little country bumpkin looking around, and it was pretty fabulous. But then I went again last spring, and honestly, like just walking around, I still am the country bumpkin when I go to visit New York City. I'm looking up and just my mouth is open, and I'm just, it's an overwhelmingly fantastic city.
Thank you. Let's go to Barbara.
Well, I have too many memories because I lived in New York for a while. I went to school there, and I spent a lot of time going there when I was growing up. I think my favorite memory, in 2008, there was a 40th reunion of those of us who were part of the Columbia strike in 1968. So I got to go back to Columbia University, where I'd gone to school, and get together with all these people who were 40 years older than when I knew them. And it's the only reunion. I went to one other reunion besides that, which was my 6th grade reunion. But I'm not a big reunion person. But it was really amazing to go and see all these people and see where they're at. And a lot of them were great. And what really amazed me was that there were several people who seemed like they're still living in 1968. So that was
love hearing that. That's pretty cool. All right, let's see who else is here. Daryl's watching from Richmond Hill in Queens. Let's see, Tim is watching from Pennsylvania, and he's saying hello to everybody. Our producer Rose Horowitz is joining from Connecticut, and Rich is watching and says, thank you for 131 days, Sree. Good evening, everyone. Great to have you, Rich. Let's see who else is here. Shailesh says hello from India. Stefan's on our team. He says, wouldn't miss this for anything. Unidentifiable special ops types of units, grabbing people off the streets, throwing them into unmarked vehicles, and taking them away to who knows where. This is not policing. No good cop would agree with this. And I know plenty, including my mom, retired. This is kidnapping, plain and simple. So just to put that in context, his mother was one of the first women police officers in the NYPD to carry a gun and patrol the streets of New York in the early 70s. And he, like others who no good police officers are able to speak up and say this is not right. So how is this being tolerated, and what is happening? What is the mayor doing? What's the governor doing? Can somebody put that in context? Maybe Eder, you can. Why did this go all wrong like this? Are there parallels to what happened with that chop zone in Seattle, and the federal government was going to come and then things dispersed and they were expecting the same thing here? What exactly is the parallel?
Right. Well, I think the only Portland specific parallel that you can draw to the chop is there were a couple of days where there were demonstrations in front of the mayor's condominium in the Pearl District, where protesters tried to set up an autonomous zone, and like the next day it was taken down by police. Mayor Ted Wheeler has gone on record saying that there's really not very much he can do to get the federal police out of the city outside of just strongly saying, we don't want you here, which is what he's been doing. And after the kidnapping incident, which that you described, which were first reported on by Oregon Public Broadcasting here in the city, the Attorney General for the state decided to sue basically the Trump administration to say, you're not here lawfully and we need you to go now. So in terms of that, I mean, that's basically the state of things right now. There's not really anything that you can compare to the autonomous zones that have cropped up in Seattle. I think the closest thing currently might be this collective called Riot Ribs. It's like a rib shack, basically, a roving rib shack that sets up and feeds people free of charge during the protests. And they're constantly on the lookout for volunteers right now, but day and night they're just feeding people who are out there by the courthouse.
Wow. This is so frustrating to hear about this. Let's take a look at that video. There's a video of a vet, a Navy vet, I believe, who was beaten by the police. And so let's talk about that for a second here. Here is that video. So Eder, can you just set this up?
Sure. So Zane Sparling is a reporter for the Portland Tribune here in town. And so it was right after federal police had sort of come out when, at the beginning of the evening, they'd set up a fence around the federal courthouse. And protesters broke down that fence and started barricading the doors of the courthouse to keep the officers inside. So this is after federal police had gotten out of the courthouse, had taken down the fence, either right before or right after they began to try and tear gas the crowd to disperse them. And this Navy veteran walked up to try and have a conversation with them. He figured that wearing his Navy sweater would, allow him some modicum of respect where they'd be willing to chat with him. And as you see, that's not what happened.
No, this is the point. Look, they're just beating him, right? Like right here. They're just hitting him. Look at that. And they broke his arm, I believe, right?
His hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's just, what is the story there? It's just like horrifying.
Evidently he was, he walked up to them and he was saying, like, this is not you defending the Constitution. This is, what are you doing? Why aren't you defending? You took an oath. And he was basically asking them for some accountability, and I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more pictures here of officers clearing away protesters there. And then you said also that they were being pulled in, right? Like there would be some people put in vans and taken away, and nobody knew where they were going, things like that. And
well, they were taken to the federal building, which is like there's the federal courthouse, there's the Justice Center, which is where the Portland police are headquartered, and then there's the federal building that's just to the south. And they're all kind of high rises for Portland. They're over 10 stories high. And I understand that a couple of the protesters anyway were taken to the federal building, but it seems like it's sort of in Gestapo fashion. They were driven around, I don't think they were blindfolded, but they were driven around, not told where they were going, couldn't see where they were going, and didn't figure out till later that they were inside the federal building. So it's that kind of disempowerment where you really confuse people and you don't let them know where they are.
So this is not like if you go to a protest, you might be arrested and then they might put plastic handcuffs on you or some kind of ties, and then they let you go. this is not that kind of action that the police or the feds are taking at this moment.
I wanted to get into this other issue that's really big, which is how much the Portland police are actually involved with the feds. And the Portland police are limited by in the tactics they can use and the weaponry they can use, both by city decisions and by state law that was passed. And so they're not supposed to use CS gas or any kind of tear gas. They're not supposed to use what they call less than lethal weaponry, and they're not supposed to use flashbang grenades or other really noxious things. But that's what the feds are using. But it seems that the police at the same time, even though they're not maybe using the tear gas themselves, are coordinating with the feds. And the Oregonian's been doing some pretty good coverage about, they did some digging in, which Eder can probably talk about more than I can, and found all this paper trail of the ways that the feds and the Portland police are still cooperating. And there's a lot of concern on the part of a lot of protesters and people in general about how disingenuous the city's being. I mean, with Mayor Ted Wheeler, it's really not clear what he knows and when he knew it. And I personally, I've had some problems with where he's coming from. And I know that Joanne Hardesty, who's a commissioner who was elected 2 years ago and who has been an advocate for, she's been on the police department's case for 30 years as an activist. And she's been real involved in the Black community in Portland since she's been in Portland. And she has been calling on the mayor to take a much stronger stand. And in a Facebook post the other day said that if he cannot stand up to the police and have them do what they're supposed to be doing, then he should make her the police commissioner.
Yeah, right. And actually, two points. I'm glad that Barbara brought that up because, like I said earlier, that kind of like tamping down on the tactics that police can use. That was one of those wins that the demonstrators had seen, and what sort of led to the demonstrations starting to get a bit smaller over the weeks until the feds came in, and that's when the crowd was galvanized again, and you saw a lot more action downtown. The second thing is that those police accountability stories, the ones about just the tangle of agencies and the lack of paperwork in terms of accountability, who's coming, who's using what tactics. That was done by an Oregonian reporter who's an intern right now, and they're about to finish up. So if anybody with any hiring capacity who wants a really great investigative reporter out there, Kay Rambo is our intern that broke all of those stories and has really led the accountability beat. So I can't say enough great things about them.
Well, thank you for saying that. And this tells you something about the state of newspapers and local journalism. I know Barbara today said she resubscribed to the Oregonian after a long time. Everybody should support local journalism in their local towns. Very important that we do that, especially in America. But wherever you are in the world, please support journalism. We truly appreciate it. So I'm going to give our speakers a minute to just take a breath and reintroduce them and reset here. Folks, you're watching Portland in Crisis. This gives them a chance to take a drink or share on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube if they haven't had a chance to do it. And our guests are Barbara Bernstein, host of Locus Pocus, a weekly environmental show on KBOO, which is a community radio station in Portland. Lauren Goche is with us. She's the founder of a progressive Realtors PAC. And we also talked about Taking Ownership PDX, which is an effort to make sure that Black Portlanders have an opportunity to own good quality and long-lasting homes that will build generational wealth. We're also joined by Eder Campuzano, who is a reporter at the Oregonian and has been on the front lines for several days. We're talking about the crisis in Portland and what is happening with the federal government stepping in. If you've been to Portland, we'd love to hear from you. If you have thoughts about Portland, or memories of Portland, I will share mine in a couple of minutes. But one thing you can do to support this show, if you haven't done this already, please share this with your friends. Please follow me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And I am live on those platforms. My Twitter handle is @Sree. My Instagram is Sreenet. And my LinkedIn, you can find me as Sreenivasan. If you can spell it, you can find me. On this show, we're live every single day. And we discuss 3 crises: health, economy, and race crises. And we're looking for your suggestions for guests and topics. You should know that coming up later this week, we are going to be meeting Maria Ressa, the Filipino journalist, a leading investigative journalist who has been under siege herself for the work she's been doing in the country and we'll meet her on Thursday. So please watch for information about that. Please subscribe. And if you haven't already, please take a look at my Twitter feed and my tributes to John Lewis, who I had the honor of meeting in 2013. He said two things I'll never forget. He said, when I told him I was a journalism professor, you can see his lips moving as I'm taking the selfie. He says, thank you for teaching journalists, because without journalists doing what they did, we could not have done what we did during the civil rights era. And the second thing is, he said, we all came to America on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. And that's what I really feel about the way we are in this country. Welcome back to our show. I hope you all had a nice long break, or at least got a drink of water. Our guests, Eder, Barbara, and Lauren, thank you so much. We should also tell everybody that Barbara is the sister of my good friend, Linda Bernstein, and we're so grateful that you're all here, but particularly a big hello to Barbara, a former New Yorker who now lives out in Portland. Let's take a look at some of the other comments coming in. Norman's watching from Brooklyn. Yay, important topic. And Leslie is watching and says, exciting, for checking in from Portland, Oregon. And Leslie put us in touch with Laurie. So thank you for that. Do you want to tell us about Leslie for a second?
Leslie was a client turned friend.
Oh, great.
Powerhouse. And yeah, she's a powerhouse. She's very smart.
And she got me in touch with you right away. Rich says, greetings from chilly Santa Cruz, California, as the fog rolls in. What is planned for the federal troops in Chicago related to this incursion into Portland? Anybody know?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that what's going on in Portland is just the pilot show for what they want to do nationally. And I guess they announced about 5 or 6 cities that they want to move federal troops in. They really started this in Washington for Trump's photo op at front of St. John's Church. So it's not in a way surprising. And I guess people have been asking why Portland. And I read a young person who said, well, it's because we're such a small city. And I think there's some truth to that. We're not Chicago, we're not LA, we're not New York. And we have a reputation of being very liberal. We have a reputation of having a very strong counterculture. And I think it's the kind of stuff that Trump just wants to make an example of, and that's why he's attacking us.
I feel like it's very perfect propaganda for him. So
and to make it sound like the city's on fire, and it's run by Democrats and all that stuff, right? So go ahead, Eder, you were saying.
Right. Well, I was just about to say that, and I don't know if I can draw the line between coincidence or not on this, but a lot of the sort of rhetoric of the administration and, a lot of what you hear in particularly right-wing circles of the city in crisis, right? And the city that's burning mirrors what right-wing demonstrators who would regularly make these incursions from Vancouver, Washington, a kind of red Clark County into Portland, saying, the liberals have taken over the city and it's up to us to liberate them and show them the way. A lot of what you hear from right-wing media and from the administration itself tends to mirror a lot of that kind of talk. And, I've covered Portland protests basically since Donald Trump got elected. And when those right-wing groups really started showing up in 2017 and having these regular rallies, August 4th, 2018, there was a huge one where, there was a big counter demonstration where both groups kind of clashed at times and were kept separate by police. But a lot of what you hear those right-wing speakers at those rallies say is, again, popping up in the national dialogue about Portland, just because that's the city's image in conservative circles and, what some conservatives feel they have to liberate the city from.
There's also a funny thing about Portland and our relationship to the right. That I was talking to a friend who lives in Tacoma today, and I was telling her that I think that a lot of the people who have been involved with the vandalism and the violence here are probably white supremacists. And I got that impression from talking to Joanne Hardesty, the city commissioner, who she's sure of it in certain cases. And so my friend said, well, yeah, there's a lot of white supremacists in Oregon. I said, well, actually, no. These people that, had these big rallies are all from Vancouver, Washington. And the people that took over the Malheur Wildlife Refuge back in 2016, which I think is an early start. It was like sort of the beginning of Trumpism before he actually took over. They were from Idaho and Nevada, and there are some homegrown right-wingers in Oregon, but a lot of the people who come here and make a stand are not from Oregon, and for some reason they see us as really fertile ground, or we have a certain kind of vulnerability where they think they can come here and kind of mix things up a lot.
Yeah, that's really sad and terrible that's happening, and people, I hope they're aware of it. We must talk about Portland's unofficial slogan, "Keep Portland Weird." I don't know if it is an unofficial slogan, but where did that come from? A little history lesson, please, Barbara.
Well, actually, I first saw it in Austin. I was in Austin back in 2000.
Me too. I saw it in Austin first.
And I was at this conference, and this guy was giving a speech and talking about this bumper sticker in Austin, "Keep Austin Weird." And it's really about supporting local businesses. So I thought, God, that sounds just like Portland. And then about 2 months later, I was at this record store, wonderful record store, Music Millennium, which I just saw in the Oregonian, is like trying to stay alive through all of this. And he wound up putting this one-story size mural on the side of his building, which said "Keep Portland Weird." But I got my "Keep Portland Weird" bumper sticker, which I had on my car until I got rid of that car. And it really does express things. So a lot of people don't understand it, and they think it's just, oh, Portland's a weird place, and there's these funny cars, and these people do these crazy things. And we were, of course, famous for having the 24-hour Church of Elvis downtown, which lasted for about 5 or 6 years. So, I mean, Portland has some sort of wacky things, but I think that the big emphasis of that is that Portland is a city of a lot of small businesses and a lot of local. It's a lot of pride in our local businesses, and that's what Keep Portland Weird is really about.
Thank you. And Eder, can you talk a little bit about this story that broke kind of nationally, internationally? People were paying attention. Out of Portland tear gas, an apparition emerges. So talk about this story and what is going on here.
Right. So this photo was taken by my colleague Dave Killen, and he and a bunch of independent journalists also. One night, a couple of nights ago, after the demonstrations kind of started to die down a little bit, and demonstrators were starting to retreat away from the Justice Center, while federal police were still advancing, this white woman wearing a beanie and a mask and nothing else just threw her hands up and started walking towards the troops to start, kind of de-escalating or to put an end to things. And, they shot pepper balls at her feet. She sat down and got into this pose that you see on the screen right now. And, the image just went viral. So that's what's happening there.
This was just, you said a couple of days ago that this happened. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a little bit foggy because I worked for 6 days straight. One of them, what was that?
Yeah, I think it was Saturday night.
Yeah. Well, again, the timeline for me is foggy because I was working like 6 days straight. One of those, like a 12-hour day to report my geography lesson.
And can one of you, maybe Laurie, you can talk about this story about the mothers of Portland? What was happening?
Yeah, so I was down there last night, and I went down to the Justice Center about 7:38, and there was not a lot of people there, and it was kind of disorganized, and we were all kind of milling. There was like a couple people talking. And we were all kind of milling around, and then all of a sudden we look up third, and couple hundred at least. The Wall of Moms showed up. So there is so this image right here is the night before, which those women got gassed, including the pregnant woman, just standing there. They got gassed. So I want to point that out. Anyway, so after that happened, basically the moms of Portland, the moms, the grandmas, all basically joined together and marched down. They all wore yellow, and it was actually pretty powerful when they showed up to see. And then I was actually standing in the middle of intersection of two streets, and they all formed a square around where I was standing, and I was like, I've never felt so protected in my life. And they linked arms, and it was really interesting. They were very organized. They were prepared to be a wall of bodies to protect anybody that needed to be. and it like they weren't there for a photo op. They were there to say, not okay for police brutality, not okay that the feds are here, not okay that the feds are here uninvited, not okay that they, you know, from everything that I have seen, and Eder, you can, you know, chime in, but these protests are peaceful, and it's the feds that are inciting violence pretty consistently, and it's been like that consistently. So it was awesome to see the moms show up. I stayed until about 11.
So the gassing hadn't happened yet.
I'm sorry?
The gassing hadn't happened yet.
No, that happened evidently at about midnight. From what I can tell, and this is a pretty consistent thing, is they wait until the crowds are smaller. They wait until there's less people to really, I don't want to say fight back, because they're not fighting back. They're peaceful protesters. Less people to maybe, I don't know, witness.
But I understand on Saturday night they tear gassed the moms a lot earlier than that.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And then also on Friday night, when Commissioner Hardesty basically organized a rally, and right after she finished speaking, and there was a rap singer going, they got gassed. I mean, I don't know if she, and though actually our county commissioner, Sharon Myron, got gassed last night. So, I mean, they're very indiscriminate about who they're gassing.
Yeah, and there's no warning. The one on Friday night that Joanne Hardesty did her rally at, everybody was just milling around, and they just gassed a crowd.
So I actually walked past Sharon after she and I both got gassed, and I had to do a double take and really just gave her like a friendly, oh, hi, as we were passing by each other while I was going back to cover and she was heading away from the protest. So just kind of a funny aside on that. But, you know, speaking of the coverage that's kind of being highlighted right now, and the coverage that tends to go viral, you know, the Navy veteran, the naked Athena who went out to confront the police, and the group of moms. If you look at those crowds and the people that kind of get a lot of attention when we're, you know, just drowning your feeds with all of our coverage throughout the night, is those people tend to be pretty white. And so if you listen to one particular organizer, their name is Lilith Sinclair, you know, they're Black, and one of their main points of contention is that, hey, they've been out there every single night for, at this point today, it will be 54 nights. And so the, you know, images of them, images of people who look like them don't go widespread like wildfire, because those are the people who we're used to seeing, you know, going out and putting themselves in danger. And so, you know, I just thought that was kind of a funny aside that, you know, most of the faces that have gone really viral in the last 48, 72 hours, you know, we put them out there into the world as journalists, but it seems like a lot of the folks that get a lot of the attention tend to be those who, you know, went out for maybe a night or two or did one thing, versus the demonstrators who are consistently out there every single night, which does create a bit of tension for me sometimes when I'm out there and people ask me about that, and I have to explain to them just news consumption habits and how things tend to spread. But just, you know, just I thought that I would throw that out there.
Sure. This is the gentleman that you were saying is an intern.
Yeah.
And that's great. So this is great to see this, and anyone who is looking to hire K Rambo, hire K Rambo. Their internship ends soon. So and they broke multiple stories, you said.
Oh yeah, they've totally been on the. They've led our accountability coverage in terms of, again, like, you know, when other agencies come in from outside of Portland, like the sheriff's office or other police departments, or even, you know, police departments from Washington State, they're not bound by the same rules as Portland police are. And so, yeah, if you go through Kay's author profile on OregonLive.com, you'll see tons of accountability stories that we simply would not have had if it weren't for them working for us this summer.
That's great. Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Eder was saying about most of the focus being on white people. Back on the very first night of the protests, I think it was May 29th, there was this image that went viral. It was on all the media, and it was these two Black guys looking like they'd run out of the Apple store with iPads. And it made you think that it was a bunch of Black people who were looting the Apple store. And in fact, most of the looting, if not, I mean, I think the lion's share of it was done by white people. And it was one of these cases that it just kind of was reinforcing the same stereotypes about Black Lives Matter being these really dangerous, violent Black people that, want to undermine American society or whatever. And it was particularly true on the TV networks, the local Portland TV stations, that they showed that image over and over and over again. It's something that we've seen the media's pulled back from, but I just kind of want to remind us that back in the end of May, I think we're still dealing with a lot of the same racism that people have been protesting since George Floyd was murdered.
Thank you for pointing
yeah,
that out.
Eder really touched on this. There's a huge discussion and tension between, Black voices really being the leaders that are in the protests, and some, they are the ones that are leading this. They are the voices that we all need to listen to over and over and over again. And they are not getting the exposure that they need to. Here we are once again.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly appreciate that. And we'll revisit this topic. And I'd love to have some Black voices on this show talking about that. David Oust writes, I noticed you're conducting podcasts about the crisis in Portland. I may be able to contribute my recent doctoral dissertation entitled How People Get Through Life Challenges Without a 10-Dimensional Ecosystem of Support. It discusses how 10 doctoral students overcome the life challenge of the closure of our Goche University. Is that a university that closed in Portland? Does anybody know?
What was the university?
Say it again.
ARGOSY University.
Never heard of it.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's not in Portland.
There was a university that closed in Portland, but it wasn't that.
Actually, a few.
Okay. I just want to say hello to Neil Parekh, who is the executive producer of one of my other shows, the New York Times Read Along, where we read the New York Times out loud like crazy people every Sunday morning. And coming up this Sunday, we're so excited, author and 22-year New York Times reporter and foreign correspondent Anthony DePalma will be here. You want to tune in 8:30 a.m. Sundays. We read the New York Times every single Sunday. And coming up this Sunday is Anthony DePalma. Yesterday was Claire Smith, the first woman inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame Writers Wing, and she was fantastic. Please check that out. Again, all of my videos you can find in our archives now of 131 plus episodes, more than 150 episodes that you can find. youtube.com/Sreenet, youtube.com/Sreenet. We have to let our guests get back to their dinners and their early evenings out in Portland. Here in New York, it's already 10 o'clock, so we've got nowhere else to go. I'm going to give each of you a chance to maybe just talk a little bit at length about your kind of closing thoughts and anything we should be watching out for in terms of understanding what's happening in Portland and how the same signs we should be watching out for in other cities in the US. And I bet, by the way, there are dictators and foreign governments looking at this and saying, this is the right idea. This is how you do it. This is how you take care of protests. But in America, the police and federal troops, and there are rules about this. The army is not deployed to fight and battle with its own citizens, but this is where we're headed if the president has its way. So let's start with Eder, and thank you very much for joining us, Eder.
Oh, of course. So, I think, unfortunately, my focus is incredibly local. I'm the education reporter at the Oregonian. And, what I've seen basically is in this movement and in this moment is sort of a tide of support for systemic change all across the city. I don't know that I can speak that much to what's going to happen federally in other cities later, even though, we know that the president has said that he's sending similar sort of troops or federal officers to Chicago next. But here in Portland, these demonstrations have sort of led to these moments of reckoning for several city agencies and other agencies that operate in the city, like Portland Public Schools, which used to have and still does have this sort of long slogging process to rename buildings. The superintendent a couple of weeks ago announced this fast track process to rename some buildings within a year even. And that's due to the pressure from these protests and pressure that students particularly have been putting on the district for a year more at this point. So that's kind of my focus. And, you know, I'm really looking at school openings and what this moment is going to mean for Portland as a journalist to see what changes, what's kind of coming down the pipe. And, you know, one thing that I think I'd want to mention before my time is up here is that the day-to-day coverage that we do at the Oregonian, that journalists do at Oregon Public Broadcasting, at Willamette Week, and at the Portland Mercury, those are a couple of alt weeklies, and the Portland Tribune, is really supplemented and really at sometimes led by independent journalists who don't work for anyone and, you know, are either doing it just to get the word out or freelancing and hoping that somebody picks up their story and, you know, pays them for it, basically. So, you know, the more that you witness the situation unfolding in Portland, there is sort of a mini vacuum of, you know, commentary, I guess, that you can draw from on what it takes to fully cover these demonstrations, because a lot of the folks that are out there doing the live broadcast, capturing things as they happen every single night, and footage that does sometimes get taken by bad faith actors and, you know, improperly contextualized. A lot of the people that are doing the really hard day-to-day work are unpaid and independent journalists. So that's just one thing that I think might be important for people out there to know, is that some of this stuff that does happen in some of the smaller moments might not be noticed by us if it weren't for the folks working tirelessly, often unpaid, to do it.
Wow, so generous of you, Eder. Thank you. How do people find you online?
So I'm on Twitter at Eder Campuzano, on Facebook at facebook.com/eder.o.campuzano, and OregonLive.com, and in the print pages of the Oregonian newspaper.
Terrific. I want to show you a moment from the Oregonian newspaper, or the newsroom of the Oregonian, when I got to come out and give a workshop in 2013, and I met a lot of your colleagues, Eder, and this is what happened. And our workshop had a hashtag SreePDX, and I was trending #1 in Portland, but I asked, what is a bigger sign of my success, that I was atop the trends or 15 empty Hot Lips pizza boxes? Tell us about Hot Lips Pizza.
Well, that's one of the places that, believe it or not, when we got to have election night coverage parties, one of the places that we would order from. So, you know, it's just one of those kind of homemade, homegrown pizza companies that, boy, I think I'm going to really miss it in November when I'm watching out for, you know, what voters say about this school bomb that's going on the ballot.
Right. And so but that was a very special moment. And I want to thank Peter Bhatia, who was the editor of the Oregonian. He's now the editor of the Detroit Free Press, for bringing me in. And my family got to spend an incredible couple of days in Portland, and we went out to Cannon Beach and places like that. Recommend visiting Portland. Everybody, please get there when you can. Add it to your lists of post-pandemic travel. And we had several comments coming in from folks talking about how this is not a city under siege. It's under siege by the federal government. It's not under siege by protesters or anything like that. I think that's important for people to know. So let's again thank Eder. Sorry, do people do that? Call you Eddie by accident?
You know, some of my old friends would call me Eddie. More often than not, it's like Eder the editor, which I'm not an editor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eder. Let's go to Lauren.
Yeah, I just want to. I'm getting messages from people all over the country, all over the world, just like we all are. You know, how's it going? And it is a consistent group of people that are really protesting police brutality, and you know, racism, and those two things go hand in hand. And our city has only been under siege when the feds showed up. I do think that this is a testing ground for Chicago. I think that there was like a reckoning in my own head when I don't remember which reporter asked, you know, Donald Trump, that I guess Biden was ahead in the polls, and if he lost, if he would leave the White House. And I think he said, I have to see. And I just thought that what is happening in Portland and possibly happening soon in Chicago, and him having to see if he's going to leave the White House was very connected for me. So just everybody pay attention. This isn't some isolated incident that's going to go away really quick. I strongly feel that Portland is still a wonderful, safe city that has its problems, just like every city, but it's a great one, and I love it.
Thank you. And how can people find you and learn more about you?
You can find me on Instagram. It's probably where I'm most, Lauren Goche. I'm also on Twitter, Lauren Goche. No one follows me. You can go ahead and try. I'm not cool enough to be on Twitter that much. Definitely follow, Taking Ownership PDX on Facebook and Instagram, and see how that goes. And if you're feeling interested in a progressive realtors pack in Oregon, it's PREBO, Progressive Real Estate Brokers of Oregon. I had to think about that for a second. So we'll hopefully be doing something good with that soon.
Thank you. And thank you very much for being here. Barbara, let's go to you.
Well, when you were talking about dictators learning things from things like what's going on in Portland, I'm reminded back in 1971, there was a big protest that went on for several days in Washington, D.C. called May Day that I was involved in. And a lot of people, I think over 1,500 or more people got arrested, and they were taken to the stadium outside of D.C., which is where they were held until they were processed. And 2 years later, that became the model for Pinochet when he took over the government of Chile, and they arrested, all the people that they arrested were taken to the stadium and met a much worse fate than the people who were arrested in DC. So that's just one example. I do feel like what's going on in Portland now is really a wake-up call for the rest of the country. But on the other hand, I'm thinking about what Joanne Hardesty said to me last month when she's been trying for the whole time she's been in city council to get a whole bunch of things passed that were a lot around the police, around budget, around taking care of the climate, our whole agenda. And she said to me last month that now she feels like she can do what she believes in, and she's getting the support of city council because she's got an army of 15,000 people behind her. And the fact that 15,000 people come out in Portland on a dime to protest and to really express the important values that I think we're all learning through the Black Lives Matter movement is very heartening. And I feel like Portland's come a really long way since I came here in '71, and you're lucky to have 200 people come out in the streets.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for sharing your story. And everyone check out her show. It's called Locus Pocus, and it's an environmental show and much more, I gather. Barbara, how else can people find you? You're also on LinkedIn, I see. And
well, yeah, I don't use that very much. I post my show on the web every week on KBOO, and it's kboo.fm/locus-focus. My current project is a radio documentary about stopping the fossil fuel industry, particularly frack gas projects in the Northwest. It's called Holding the Thin Green Line, and the website is holdingthethingreenline.org.
Holding the Thin Green
Line. We are the thin green line, and that's another part. That's a whole other story to talk about Portland, but we really are holding the thin green line here against the fossil fuel industry.
Well, when we talk about the fossil fuel industry, we'll have you back on if you're willing to join us. Thank you so much. I do want to say that I feel like a celebrity has just followed me because Kay Rambo just followed me on Twitter, so that's really cool. And please say hello, and I'm going to read all these comments after you all leave. And the other thing we do on the show is we say their name. We asked the great law school professor, Kimberly Crenshaw, what can we as allies of the Black community do? And she said, say their names. So I'm going to be doing one of the things she asked us to do is say their names of people, victims of police brutality. But I want to say to all of you who are watching right now, before we let our guests go, that we think here we're having this nice bubble of a moment where we're all on the same page and we understand that police brutality is wrong, that protests should be allowed peacefully. There are terrible comments that I'm not reading out to you. People saying, arrest those SOBs. People saying they're throwing things and hurting people. Just awful, awful things. So even in this tiny show compared to all of the other media in the world, the trolls have found us and are taking the time and energy, often with their names on it. These are not like Russian trolls hiding. These are in public, have no shame, and are cowards to write this from behind their computers. But this is the reality in which we live. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing your insights and for continuing to tell us about what's happening in Portland, a beautiful, beautiful part of the country that deserves much better than what's happening right now. Thank you very much, each of you. Thank you, Eder.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Bye.
And thank you, Barbara. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to read some of the comments and respond to the comments, and then we're going to read those names. I'm going to say to our producers who've been working so hard, please go. We're grateful to all the work that you do, but if you need to take a break or get back to your work, please do that as well, because this is going to take a little while for me to read all of these comments and respond to them here on the show. This will also be recorded and play instantly as soon as we're done on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So if you would like to do that, and if you are new to us, please join us every single night as we cover this. It's usually 9 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes it's noon Eastern time as well. When we had the head of pandemics at the WHO, we have the chief scientist of WHO. Those times we try to do it at noon Eastern so we can get more of that European crowd to join us as well. So let's look at some of the comments. We have someone watching from Kolkata City. Aparna is watching from LA and says hello to Colombians like Barbara Bernstein. And Monica says great to see everyone. Aparna says 131 shows and is impressed by that. I'm impressed that so many of you have struck through 131 shows and stuck with us. We're so grateful. Kathleen is watching from California. I was liking what she said about the Oregonian. Glad they're doing a lot of strong coverage, and I will look for it. Thank you so much. And Vandana has put a link to Locus Pocus that you can find here. And Rajan, who was a guest on our show on the 100, I forget the number, but it was our July 4th show, and What America Means to Me episode. Look at this. Again, I'm not showing you the trolls. I don't need to. There is no obligation I have to show you, but I'll read some of them. You can't even get that lie out of your mouth without stuttering. Back the blue is what he says. I back the blue. My father-in-law is a police officer, was a police officer. We back the blue because we say that we hold the blue to a higher standard. That's the important part. Let's see who else is watching. Vandana, one of our producers, says taking ownership renovates and revives Black-owned homes that have asked for their help. Visit their site here, takingownershippdx.com. Border agents now patrol the streets on the streets of Portland. That's just a whole new level of crazy, says Stefan. Apollo is here. He was our guest on our Vegas show, different set of circumstances on Friday night. So please look at our archives, find our Vegas show. Apollo was terrific with our friend Terry Thompson. How interesting that they use DHS Border Patrol, people that cage children. Portland is a start. I fear it'll get more aggressive. And Rose is asking us to share and amplify her posts. And Mark Lees is here. He's in Durham, North Carolina. I was a guest on his podcast this afternoon. It was great to be with him on IBM TV. Gentrification is very real around the country. Thanks for the amazing work you're doing, Lauren. I hope someone tells Lauren that they said that. Rachel Alexandria says, Lauren Goche is the bomb. She's doing much great work in amplifying BLM work. Thank you, Rachel. I'm so sorry I didn't read this when Lauren was here, and I'm hoping Lauren and others will check those comments out. And Linda says she's so cool. Sudha says, watching from Hastings on Hudson. Hi, Auntie. Great to see you and glad to have you with us. Howdy from Texas. Rick Botello says, reacting to Barbara's comments, our colossal COVID failure gives us a unique opportunity to discover innovative ways of addressing the 21st century mega problems, especially as it relates to planetary health. Thank you for that. Bruce Miller's watching from Seattle. Leslie's watching from Portland. Saurav's watching Sir with love from India. Good morning. Thank you and happy to have you here. Linda says that's her sister. Barbara and I had a sister activity of going to demonstrations together after I joined her at Barnard College here in New York. And Sudha's pointing out one retired naval officer tried to intervene to help out, and he was beaten up and fractured his hand. We showed that video earlier. My mom's watching from Kerala. Hi, Amma. Love you. Thank you for watching every day. Really appreciate it. And Leslie is sharing comments as well. And Daryl says, today I participated in the strike for Black Lives organized by 32 BJ Union and a campaign. It was supposed to be in front of Trump Tower, Central Park West and 61st. But police blocked it off. There were 300 police officers, about the same number of protesters. And here's this somebody saying liars to us for no reason. Mighty Marcia says, if they'd arrest all the anarchists, we wouldn't have these cities being held hostage. No, you are wrong. We heard that from the reporters. We're on the scene. that it's the feds that are trying to make this much worse, and they're under siege from the feds and not from the protesters. When Trump was asked about this, he said people are their own problem. He said Chicago, New York, they can be troopers, but no one knows, and that's the problem. My mom says she's proud of my 131st episode. Thank you, Amma. Only because of you, somebody else treats the city. Someone's saying, look at this. This is one of my family friends says that anarchists are destroying the city. I hope you heard the entire story of what we talked about. It's not anarchists. You saw there were peaceful moms and they were being beaten. A Navy veteran standing there with his hands up, beaten and his hand broken. This is not some kind of, this is not anarchists destroying the city peacefully. To you and every one of the people who voted for Trump for tax reasons, understand that this is what you have voted for. This president has delivered the worst results of the pandemic in the world. In the world, not the world, not in terms of the developed world or the developed economies, the world. There are only America is only 5% of the world's population. It has 25% of COVID deaths. There are 600,000 COVID deaths that have taken place. 150,000 of them are in America. This is the direct result of this president. And this show and me, we are covering this and we're on top of it. And we're going to hold the president accountable. And we're not NBC News. We won't have that much of an effect. But to everybody who voted for this president for a variety of other reasons, come get your boy is what I say. And look where we are in this world. Paulo says, go K Rambo. And Neil said, support local newspapers and local journalists. And Vandana has been posting links. It's just fantastic to see all of this. And Mark has been tagging his friends. Please tag them so they can watch this as soon as the show is over. What do people of Portland think of the protests, or are they sick of it? Someone asks, well, you met 3 people of Portland. They were not sick of it. They were sick of the feds coming in and interfering on here. People, again, tagging people and sharing people. This is so great to see this. It is the left-wing groups that are doing the protests. No, these are people fighting for justice. These are African Americans fighting against police brutality. It's not being left-wing or right-wing. You go out on the streets and see the protests. These are people who believe in the American dream and the American ideals and the American freedoms. And that's really important. And so many comments coming in here. So many complicated things. I can't show all of it. Jason is pointing out that right-wing demonstrators come here for the optics and to bait others. It's just that simple, says Jason. Thank you for sharing that. And just one comment after another, good and bad. So many pictures and stories coming up here. Who are they mothers of? So someone's complaining that the mothers you saw were white. Portland is an overwhelmingly white city. So obviously, if mothers come out to protest, they're coming out to protest not because their kids are being arrested or beaten by police. They're protesting because it's wrong. You've got to care about it because it's wrong, not because you were not affected by this. And this is my message to the Indian American community. Many Indian Americans are oblivious and dumb to what is happening in the African American community. They were never taught this. This is not part of the education you get in India, or you come here for graduate school, you'll never learn any of this. There's no civics taught. There's no history taught. And that ignorance and ridiculous statements that we sometimes see is really pathetic. And Linda says, moms rock. That is all absolutely right. And that should have been the last word, but we have so many more comments. We have extra number of trolls coming on here every night. So lots of people really upset that we're talking about this are here. And I don't know if it's because it's Portland and everybody's invested in this, but lots of crazy people are here. So many comments coming in. I'm not showing it to you because I have no obligation to show you the comments of these ridiculous people. Linda says we have nowhere else to go because it's New Yorkers at 10 p.m. Neil says authoritarian regimes are watching Portland and taking notes. Once again, we're an example for the world. Yes, sarcasm for sure. So many comments coming in here. Ellen says, ironically, what's happening in Portland is the reason so many people justify their use of guns, their ability to have guns. I'm anti-guns, but here's the rationale. Imagine our government is in this protest against the citizens of this country. And just so many other comments coming in here, just too many for me to mention. Sadly, my former older godson is pro-fascistic behavior, a former cop from the privileged branch of my mother's family who got to where they are thanks to the generosity of my mom and her aunts. That relative has long been dead to me. I'm so sorry. What Trump has done has gone far beyond what we used to joke, that at Thanksgiving is going to be awkward. It's gone far beyond that, as you're seeing in these conversations. So just to make everybody really upset who's watching, all you trolls and all you people who don't understand what is about to happen to you, you're about to hear me read their names. We usually read them. Well, before I read the names, I want to just thank everybody for watching. Thank you for supporting the show. Please email me. You see my email address. We're on the air every single day, 131 straight days. We're looking for guests, themes, sponsors. We always love to get more of all of those as we cover this story. We're looking to collaborate, work on interesting projects with you. Please email me, sree@sree.net, sree@sree.net. And what we're now about to do is to read their names, because that's one of the things that I was asked to do by Kimberly Crenshaw. When I asked her, what can allies do? She said, say their names and read their names. So that's what exactly we're going to do right now. And these are from the Say Her Name report, the updated version. And Breonna Taylor killed by police in her bed on March 13, 2020. As I read these names, ask yourself, how many times have you even heard these names? You've heard a lot of some of these names, but you've many names, most of the names you've never heard. Why? Because even in this situation, more attention is paid to men than to women. Tatiana Jefferson, Charlena Siobhan Lyles, Corinne Gaines, India Kager, Sandra Bland, Alexia Christian, Maya Hall, Megan Hockaday, Janisha Fonville, Natasha McKenna, Tanisha Anderson, Aura Rosser, Shanique Proctor, Michelle Cousseau, Pearlie Golden, Gabriela Navarez, Yvette Smith, Renisha McBride, Miriam Carey, Kayam Livingston, Kayla Moore, Shelley Fry, Melissa Williams, Shulena Weldon, Alicia Thomas, Chantel Davis, Charmel Edwards, Rekia Boyd, Cherise Francis, Aliana Stanley Jones, Tarika Wilson, Catherine Johnston, Alberta Spruill, Kendra James, Latanya Haggerty, Margaret Laverne Mitchell, Taisha Miller, Danette Daniels, Frankie Ann Perkins, Sanji Taylor, and Eleanor Bumpers, killed by police on October 29, 1984. We usually start by reading out this photograph and looking at this picture, this cover of Time magazine, a cover by Titus Caffer, stunning cover of Time magazine, a painting that he did. And on the right, an equally stunning and moving and disturbing and at once smile-inducing photograph, but so sad, of a young George Floyd with his mom, Larcinia Floyd. She would die 2 years almost to the day that he would be murdered, killed in Minneapolis. They're now both buried next to each other in the city of Houston. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being with us and listening as we read those names. If you didn't recognize some of those names, do your homework, read about them, and learn the stories. As we say on the show, I'm the son-in-law of a police officer, and we hold police officers to higher standards. It's not about the guilt or innocence of anybody. It is that police officers should not be judge, jury, and executioner. Federal troops should not be undercover in New York, in American cities, as we have seen in Portland. And that's why we went to Portland today and talked about Portland today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. We want to thank our sponsors, and we want to tell you that we have all these great shows in our archives that you can check out. Recent episodes include yesterday's with Positivity with Tim Salau, who's the former chief evangelist of WeWork and founder of the Guide app. I laughed and laughed at a time when everything's going to hell. We laughed because we have to laugh. We also did a story about the winner of the World Food Prize and the importance of climate security and soil for food security. We did an episode about Vegas under COVID. I learned so much watching that. We did an episode with Christian Amanpour last Thursday. You can find all of these archives. This is just 1 week of episodes, folks. We did a show about art in the time of COVID. We went to Rome and Lima to talk to artists about a great new project there. We talked about I Fund Women, a project that is supporting women and women-owned businesses and the people who want to fund them. I Fund Women. We interviewed Karen Kahn. So please check out all these episodes. We're so proud of the series of conversations that we host on this show, and we would love to see you all support them by going into the archives. Please hit that subscribe button. It makes a difference in the work we do. And with that, I will say that one of the things my company does, Digimentors, it's a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Do not cancel your event without talking to us. Do not postpone, and do not even think about turning your physical event virtual without talking to us. We are doing dozens of events a month. Sree at Sree.net, SREE at SREE.net. Write to me. I'll send you a brochure. Happy to chat with you and show you how we can be helpful. So many comments coming in. I am sorry that I'm not able to read them, partly because all these horrible comments that are in there as well. And people are talking here and commenting, but we're also saying things that I think make a lot of sense. Just like, this is terrible. There's a far higher proportion of trolls on this show than we've had in the 131 shows. It shows you we're having some kind of impact, but these are cowards who have nothing to contribute to society and instead want to just go out and cause chaos. And they're doing that very well, as you know, online. So thank you all, everybody, for being here. Watch for our big episode with Maria Ressa, the Filipino journalist who's been arrested under the authoritarian regime in the Philippines. And that's the kind of place where they say journalists are the enemy of the people. Not in America, not until 2015 and 2016. So with that, we'll say goodbye. Thank you very much, everybody. Please stay in touch. Please tag us and please follow us on all the socials. And we want to give one more shout out to our sponsors. We have two sponsors we want to tell you about. One is Muckrack Academy, which allowed and arranged for Linda Bernstein and me and Shristi Heber and Stefan Kaplan to put together, along with Mike Schneider, Fundamentals of Social Media for Journalists, PR Pros, and Everyone, a free certification course, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. More than 4,000 people have signed up, and so should you. You'll learn about Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and not YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and LinkedIn. You will learn a lot, as Linda and I did when we did that. And finally, a shout out to She's on Call, a new show on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube. Please check them out. Two surgeon friends of mine, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian, host the show. They have guests every week. Last week, yesterday, they had Dr. Wendy Sinta, who's an obesity doctor, and Dr. Tamara Fountain, who is an ophthalmologist, to talk about their work. We had 4 women leaders of medical societies on one show. You don't see that anywhere except on She's on Call. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you. Take care, and please be in touch. Sree at Sree.net. Bye. Oops, I forgot to hit bye.